Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, the Honorable Chancellors of the Chancery Courts of Davidson County, 20th Judicial District, State of Tennessee, finding it fit and proper to do so, meet in special session outside of the courthouse at the request of the President and the Board of Directors of the Nashville Bar Association to entertain resolutions in memory of former members of the Nashville Bar Association recently deceased. All persons present are asked to draw nigh and give attention so the memorial resolutions to be presented may be heard. God save the Honorable Chancery Courts of Davidson County, this state of Tennessee, and these United States. The Honorable Patricia Head Moskal, Chancellor Part 1, presiding. Please be seated.
Good morning and welcome to the Nashville Bar Association's 2021 Fall Memorial Service. We want to thank all of the families, friends, partners, and colleagues of those attorneys and judges who recently have passed. We appreciate you being here today, and we express our sympathy to each of you. Together, we will memorialize, celebrate, and honor the lives and careers of each lawyer and judge. The four chancellors of the Davidson County Chancery Court are honored to sit as one court today and preside over this special service in this very beautiful historic church. To change things up just a little bit, my fellow chancellors are seated in the front row, and I am pleased to be joined by Chancellor Ann Martin, Chancellor Ellen Lyle, and Chancellor Russell Perkins. In addition, we are joined by our Clerk and Master, Maria Salas, who just opened this special session of court today. Since the COVID pandemic began, we have held these memorial services remotely. And so we are especially pleased to be back in person today, and I'm delighted to see all of you, to have the opportunity to once again warmly greet each other. In the interest of keeping everyone safe and protecting the health of all who are present, the NBA has decided to forego the luncheon reception that is traditionally held downstairs after the memorial service. By a long-standing tradition of over 100 years, the Chancery Court keeps the records for the NBA memorial service. Each lawyer who has passed is honored and memorialized by their colleagues through a written resolution that is entered upon the books and records of the Chancery Court. For our remembrances today, a colleague of each lawyer or judge will come forward and present the memorial resolution and move for its admission. The court will reserve ruling on those motions until all resolutions are presented. Our gathering today implements the Tennessee Supreme Court's most recent administrative order regarding COVID-19, and under that order, facial coverings are strongly encouraged, so thank you to each of you who are following that protocol. Today's presenters, however, may remove their masks when speaking at the podium if you are comfortable doing so in order to be more clearly heard. Now, I am pleased to introduce Mike Abello, President of the Nashville Bar Association.
Good morning. My name is Mike Abello. I'm the President of the Nashville Bar Association for 2021. I want to thank the court, Chancellor Lyle, Chancellor Martin, Chancellor Moskal, and Chancellor Perkins for convening this en banc session of all the chancellors. This is a special honor for those who are being recognized today. As far as I know, this is the only time that the Chancery Court sits en banc as a body of four judges. This is also the 121st time that the court has convened this memorial service for over 100 years. This is one of the events that makes practicing law in Nashville special. I want to extend a special welcome to the families and friends of the attorneys we're honoring here today. One of the reasons for this service is for we, the members of the Nashville Bar and the court, to let you know how your family members made a real difference in our justice system, how they made justice real and fair, how they made the rule of law a reality. We knew them in their professional lives, and we want to share with you the positive impact that we saw. This event would not be possible without the effort of the Bar Association's Historical Committee and its Memorial Service Committee. Those committees devote countless hours to carefully researching our honorees and making the motions you are about to hear. I want to thank the lawyers and judges who took time out of their busy schedules to research and prepare the resolutions for those we are remembering today. I now have the honor of recognizing Keith Turner, the chair of the Memorial Service Committee, and I want to thank him and his committee for their work. Keith.
The memorial resolution for Judge Todd Campbell will be presented by Judge Aletta Trauger.
May it please the court and all of you, the memorial resolution for Judge Todd J. Campbell. Todd Campbell went to law school not to become a trial lawyer or a corporate lawyer, but because of his interest in government and politics. He became one of the first experts in federal election campaign finance law, and his first election law client was none other than Al Gore. Todd practiced law at Gullett, Sanford, Robinson, and Martin for 10 years, but his real love was political campaigns. When the Clinton-Gore ticket was elected in 1992, Todd went to Washington and served as counsel for Vice President Al Gore. He was named to the district court bench in 1995, the youngest federal district court judge in the country, a mere 39 at the time, with 2 young sons. During his 21 years on the bench, he presided over some 200 trials and 4 cases that went to the U.S. Supreme Court. Todd was a wise judge who always treated lawyers with courtesy and professionalism. His approach to judicial opinions was simple: think more, write less. And when humorous situations arose, he could be heard to quip, "You can't make this stuff up." During his tenure on the federal bench, Todd amazingly found time to teach courses at UT Law School, the Nashville School of Law, and Belmont University, not to mention coaching over 20 youth baseball teams and performing significant volunteer work at the Tennessee School for the Blind. I think Todd's favorite task as a district court judge was performing naturalization ceremonies. He did most of them in the courthouse, but performed several at Andrew Jackson's home, the Hermitage. Todd had humble origins that he loved to share with new citizens through a PowerPoint presentation. An immigrant ancestor once spent a few days in debtor's prison. So when he swore in new citizens, Todd liked to observe that in a few generations, his family had gone from the jailhouse to the White House to the courthouse. With his beloved wife, Margaret, who's here today, who lovingly tended to him single-handedly as disease worked its vicious way through his body. Todd lived the American dream. He was taken from us way too soon. Therefore, be it resolved by the Nashville Bar Association that we express our profound appreciation and gratitude for the life and work of Judge Todd J. Campbell. We mourn in his passing the loss of his wisdom, judgment, humility, humor, and caring spirit. And I move the admission of this resolution and that it be spread on the minutes of the Chancery Court.
The memorial resolution for Brian Rorig will be presented by Mary Beth
May it please the court. William Bryan Rorig was born here in Nashville in 1953 and died a few days after his 66th birthday in 2019. Bryan was my former boss and a great friend. In fact, Bryan taught me how to practice bankruptcy law for the small price of a case of Milwaukee's Best Light beer and a carton of obscure, inexpensive brand of cigarettes. In fact, when I went to the convenience store near his home office in Goodlettsville and got the beer, the clerk said, "There's only one person who buys this beer, and it's this lawyer that lives over there." And I said, "That's Bryan." But that was back in 1996. I had just received my law license, and Bryan took the time to teach me how to calculate a Chapter 13 plan. While he was teaching me, I quickly saw he was a master at calculating plans. He flew through the calculations on his financial calculator and his adding machine, and using a mechanical pencil that he always carried with him, he had figures all over his homemade Chapter 13 plan paper. I had difficulty following him, and I asked if I could have the ad roll tape from his adding machine so I could study the flow of his calculations later. He tore off that ad roll tape, and I noticed there were calculations on both sides of the paper. I didn't know what that meant at the time, and it was several years later once I understood. But in any event, Bryan taught me as a baby lawyer, someone he had never met before, on his own time off, how to do Chapter 13 work and how to ultimately make a living. Over his many years as a lawyer, he taught many lawyers how to practice bankruptcy law. In 2000, I began working for him and did so for 5.5 years. In those 5.5 years, I learned many things about Bryan. He loved many things and was very passionate about many things. He loved bankruptcy law. He loved his many dogs, including his favorite, Rebel Yell. He loved Civil War history. He loved saving money or not spending money at all. And he loved the lake and being outdoors. While working for him, I found out why back in 1996 there were calculations on both sides of that ad roll tape. He used both sides. There was no reason to have a blank side on the other. He was also opposed to using Post-it notes. We had scrap paper and paper clips we could get for free from the bankruptcy court clerk's office. As the owner of my firm now, I too am kind of frugal. I don't use an adding machine, but I do print on both sides of scrap paper. And I don't use Post-it notes either. I have scrap paper and paper clips. Bryan would be proud. Bryan's office in Gallatin was a Civil War museum, and unless you wanted a history lesson, you didn't ask about the many paintings and prints and busts of generals that covered all the walls and surfaces in his office. Bryan was a zealous advocate for his clients. He loved his garden. He loved being on his jet ski. And about a month before he passed, Bryan and I talked on the phone for about an hour. I'm so glad, I'm so glad that I had that opportunity to express to him how much he meant to me as a mentor and as a friend. I was able to tell him how much I truly loved him. We both shed tears. For those of you who didn't know Bryan, I do think it's appropriate to quote a couple of his Civil War heroes in closing. Robert E. Lee at Stonewall Jackson's funeral stated, "I know not how to replace him." There will never be another Bryan Rorig. He is truly irreplaceable. Lastly, Jefferson Davis, grieving the death of General Albert Johnston, stated, "Without doing injustice to the living, it may safely be asserted that our loss is irreparable, and that among the shining host of the great and good who now cluster around the banner of the country, there exists no purer spirit, no more heroic soul than that of the illustrious man whose death I join you in lamenting." I did prepare a written memorial, and I move this court to enter it into the record.
The memorial resolution for Jim Curtis will be presented by Ralph DeMarco.
May it please the court, this is the memorial resolution for James L. Curtis. James L. Jim Curtis was born on April 26, 1947 in Soddy Daisy, Tennessee, to the late Harold and Betty Curtis. He was a graduate of the Nashville School of Law and practiced in Nashville for 46 years. Prior to attending law school, Jim obtained his master's degree in biology. He taught biology at Cameron School, where one of his 9th grade pupils was Phil Smith, who later became judge of the Fourth Circuit Court here in Nashville. Jim practiced law for many years with Ed Highland, David Huff, and Peggy Mathis, and later with his son-in-law, Paul Jeter. He urged his legal secretary, Barbara Henry, to attend school, and he practiced law with her after she graduated from Nashville School of Law. Ed Highland remembers that Jim was very competitive. One story that Ed tells is while practicing law with Jim, Ed and his wife had twin girls. A short time later, Jim's wife also gave birth to twin girls. Jim contacted the Nashville Bar newsletter at the time, prior to the Nashville Journals, and told them of the 2 sets of twins while they practiced law together. Jim had to get one up on Ed and made sure that the article mentioned that Jim's girls were identical twins, while Ed's were just fraternal twins. Shortly after the birth of the 2 sets of twins, someone on the 14th floor of Parkway Towers had triplets. Ed Howland says that afterwards people started moving off that floor. Jim enjoyed the rough and tumble of domestic relations law and also practiced some criminal law. He was old school, and he did not care much for the new technologies such as fax machines, computers, emails, etc. He believed, as do many, that the law traditionally, and for good reason, is slow to change, and that provides certainty and some level of comfort for all involved. Jim was considerate of his staff. If one needed help or time off, he was always willing to work it out. There were no set rules. The rule of reasonableness prevailed. Jim enjoyed riding his Harley-Davidson motorcycle and went on a number of memorable road trips with his friends. He was a longtime supporter of Vanderbilt University football and basketball teams, as well as the Tennessee Titans and Nashville Predators. Jim was an active member of St. Andrew Lutheran Church in Franklin, Tennessee. Jim also enjoyed spending time with his grandchildren and family. He will be remembered by his family and friends as a kind, giving, hard-working husband, father, grandfather, lawyer, and friend. Jim died on September 13, 2019, at the age of 72. He is survived by his wife, Susan Gepp, daughters Kristen Davis, Autumn Jeter, Lauren Graves, and Leah Toohey, 8 grandchildren, and brother Johnny Curtis of Chattanooga. Therefore, be it resolved by the Nashville Bar Association that we honor the life, the work, and the spirit of Jim Curtis and mourn his passing and the loss of an outstanding colleague. Be it further resolved that his memorial resolution be placed in the permanent records of the association and entered in the in memoriam minute book of the Chancery Court of Davidson County, Tennessee, and that copies thereof be furnished to members of his family.
The memorial resolution for P.V. Jackson III will be presented by Don Smith.
May it please the court, this memorial resolution is hereby submitted for entry. When P.V. Jackson III left this life on February the 13th, 2020, He left an enduring imprint on his family, friends, and colleagues, and all who knew him well. His integrity and work ethic were remarkable and enviable. His sense of fairness was rock solid, and his empathetic nature made him a friend and refuge to many. Many things were important to P.V. Jackson, but those who knew him remember first and foremost as a devoted husband, father, devoted husband and father. He loved and cherished his family, his wife Cole, who predeceased him, and his sons Lee, Hunter, and grandchild Hunt. P.V. Jackson was born in Nashville, Tennessee, and graduated from Baylor School for Boys in 1951. He then attended Vanderbilt University, after which he went into the Army in 1953. And upon his return from the Army, he attended and graduated from Vanderbilt University. Then he went to work for Clark, Land Street, and Kirkpatrick, a Nashville brokerage firm. During that tenure, he attended the Nashville School of Law and graduated with a law degree. Thereafter, he went to practice with the Metropolitan Government of Nashville and Davidson County Law Department, wherein he practiced until he began to practice in the office of Joe Binkley. After leaving the office of Joe Binkley, he began to practice law with Thompson, Dale, and Dale, where he engaged in the general practice of law until his retirement in 2000. P.V. Jackson was witty, charming, conversant. He had a colorful personality which more than made up for his lack of interest in fashion. He was full of life and loved to share war stories, including those of military battles and legal battles. He was also an avid reader. He loved to study history and then, of course, discuss it with his friends. He loved to play golf as well as enjoyed other sports. He was a great fan of the Vanderbilt Commodores. Be it resolved that we honor the life, work, and legacy of our colleague, P.V. Jackson III. Be it resolved that this memorial resolution be placed in the permanent records of the association and entered in the memorial book, minute book of the Chancery Court of Davidson County, and that copies be forwarded and furnished this 18th day of November 2001, submitted for entry, Don L. Smith. You'll have to pardon me.
The memorial resolution for Wayne Leroy will be presented by King Bartley.
May it please the court. Wayne Leroy would have figured out a way to chew a cigar and wear a mask. William Wayne Leroy was born in Bridgeport, Alabama on July 18, 1931. He departed life on July 25, 2020. Wayne was a prominent member of the Nashville Bar Association. He was a fixture at the Tennessee legislature, a faithful communicant at St. Philip's Episcopal Church, and a friend and mentor at the firm he helped establish, Schulman, Leroy & Bennett. Wayne was from humble beginnings. He was one of 13 children born to John Daly Leroy and Emily Cookston Leroy. He was raised in rural Sequatchie Valley in Marion County that he knew and well loved. He graduated from Marion County High School and from the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. He was the first member of his family to graduate from college. Wayne tried his hand at a variety of careers. He was a sports reporter for newspapers. He sold patent medicine. And then he had an extensive career in insurance, beginning first as an adjuster and ultimately lobbying for the insurance industry. While working for the insurance industry, he enrolled in law school and received a law degree in 1966 from what is now known as the Nashville School of Law. He began his law practice in the firm of Schulman, McCarley, Hollins, and Pride, which firm eventually evolved into Schulman, Leroy & Bennett. He served as the firm's senior partner for many years. During the course of his career at Schulman, Leroy & Bennett, he continued his involvement in the insurance industry. He had a substantial litigation practice in insurance defense and also in government relations. He represented numerous insurance companies and represented insurance organizations as a lobbyist before the legislature. Throughout his career, Wayne was respected and continuously sought out by those seeking answers and guidance on insurance issues. His litigation practice broadened to include building and construction, business, and estate matters. Throughout his career, he was known and respected for his integrity and his quick ability to distill convoluted issues to their core and to make the very complicated understandable. As a lobbyist, he was valued by his clients and the legislators for his straightforward approach to sometimes difficult issues and for his constant and dependable honesty. Wayne could be depended on to tell the truth as he saw it under all circumstances. His clients, legislators, and his adversaries appreciated his humor and respected his candor. Inside the firm that bore his name, Wayne Leroy was a valued source of advice, knowledge, and integrity, which created a sense of confidence in those who practiced with him. He used his renowned abilities as a storyteller to explain complicated matters to all of us who were privileged to work with him. His door was always open to assist his partners, and especially young attorneys, with questions of law, dealing with clients, and issues in their lives. Wayne was generous with his time to all, attorneys, his friends, and to many clients. Many of his clients became lifelong friends. Wayne was always a source of numerous stories with the ability and joy in telling or retelling stories or jokes, which translated into a remarkable ability to convey information in a meeting, in private, or in the courtroom. Wayne was especially proud of his family and his wife, Carolyn, with whom he was married for 60 years, and also his 3 daughters. All of his daughters followed in his footsteps in either practice of law or in government relations. He was also extremely proud of his grandchildren. He especially enjoyed having his family together with him at the farm he had in his beloved Sequatchie Valley. There he hosted friends, family, and the firm on occasion to his delight. Wayne was active in the St. Philip's Episcopal Church and in the Episcopal Diocese of Tennessee. For 50 years, he was a member and attendee at the Episcopal Laymen's Conference, and he never missed their annual meeting. W. Wayne Leroy was a man of unquestioned integrity, generosity, honesty, good humor, and loyalty. Those of us who knew him and worked with him are better for having done so. He is sorely missed by all who knew him and loved him. Therefore be it resolved, in the passing of W. Wayne Leroy, the Nashville Bar Association has lost one of its most honored and unique members, an example of how to practice law, live life, and a joy to all who had the pleasure to know him. This resolution for W. Wayne Leroy, who died on July 25th, 2020, shall be spread upon the minutes of the association, and copies of the resolution sent to his family, his wife Carolyn, and his daughters Emily, Ellen, and Mary.
The memorial resolution for David Young Parker will be presented by Paul White.
I want to take a moment before I begin this resolution and offer up a couple of personal comments. I have known David Parker for well over 30 years, and we were good friends. And it is very intimidating for me to be here today doing this for him. Not intimidating because I don't want to do it, but intimidating following a person of the powerful presence and the commanding ability to orate that David Parker had. He was an orator and a spellbinding one, and I am not, as you will soon see. Of the 8 members of this committee who prepared this memorial resolution, the bulk of the resolution was quite artfully drafted by Chancellor Carol McCoy and composed most of this memorial resolution. Time constraints prohibit the reading of the entire memorial resolution, but I want you to know that those of us on the committee added to Carol's comments. We did not take away from them. We all agreed that David was the heart and soul of this committee for many years. After the death of David Rutherford, he was the commanding influence on this committee. He attended all the meetings. He always volunteered to prepare memorial resolutions at every single session and generally prepared more than one. David was a big man in every sense of that term. He was a commanding presence physically. He was a big person with a big heart and a big smile, and he was always friendly, faithful, and true to the lawyers in this community. He was full of wisdom, experience, and practical advice for any of us who sought those characteristics from him. Now to the resolution. And Keith, you'll just have to turn off your clock. I'm sorry, but we all agreed this one's going to take a little bit longer. Whereas David Young Parker, Sr., served on the Memorial Resolution Committee of the Nashville Bar Association Historical Committee for approximately 26 years, during which time he prepared and delivered dozens of memorial resolutions for his fellow lawyers and enjoyed the preparation and delivery of each and every one of those. His stentorian voice, the envy of every lawyer who ever heard it, and now it falls upon one much less worthy of his oratorical abilities to succeed him and deliver his own memorial resolution. It is not without some trepidation and knowledge of the shortcomings of ability that this task is undertaken. David loved this service. He thought that having it in the spring was much less invigorating than having it in the fall. He told his wife, Sandra, that he loved the nip in the air, that it quickened his step, and he looked forward to meeting his colleagues after a walk to this church in the brisk morning air. He particularly liked it when the days were sunny and unseasonably cool. He thought all of those elements, together with the lunch afterward, was the height of his fall celebration. Sandra related that he was just like a little boy anticipating Christmas morning, getting ready for this service every year. And we all enjoyed his presentation at these services. David always volunteered to prepare and present at least one resolution at each of these services, and sometimes more. In the summer of 1965, David Young Parker, a second-year Vanderbilt law student, held a summer clerkship with Chattanooga lawyer Leonard R. Tanner, father of tennis pro Roscoe Tanner. David arrived at the law office early one morning and set out to sharpen all the pencils needed for the day. When Mr. Tanner came in, he took one look at what David was doing and he asked, "Son, do you know what it cost me to support my family?" David thought he was getting to be a tax lawyer, and he had worked on Tanner's tax estimates, so he answered, "Yes, sir." Tanner said, "I have a rule that until I make my first $100 every day, I don't do anything like what you are doing." This was one of many lessons that Mr. Tanner provided the green law student. Lesson learned: focus on what is important, not on what you think looks good. David Parker learned many lessons that he used to build a tremendously successful practice as a solo practitioner despite a rocky start. He grew up in Highland Park, an inner city part of Chattanooga. His mother, Sarah Tittle Parker, raised him with the belief that you taught the Bible to your children from the time they got up until they went to bed. She was a strict fundamentalist member of the Church of Christ. His pharmacist father, Arthur Harry Parker, owned and operated a local drugstore on the next street over, which backed up to the family home. As teenagers, David and his older brother worked at their father's store from 7:30 a.m. until 11:30 p.m. unless they were at school or church. After graduating from Chattanooga High School in 1959, he enrolled at David Lipscomb College in Nashville. David felt that attending David Lipscomb was like attending a big church with kids from all over the country. The college, a good school, had extreme rules. Bible readings were an everyday occurrence. He majored in pre-med since his dad was a pharmacist and his cousin a pathologist. He took classes in science but did not do well his first semester. His brother, a senior at Auburn, suggested that David might do better in law subjects than medical subjects. David changed his major to business administration and contacted Vanderbilt Law to find out what the requirements were to enter law school. He graduated from college in 1963 and took the LSAT. Although he tried to correctly answer all the questions, he failed to finish. Vanderbilt Law School Dean John S. Beasley advised him to retake the test and to answer all the questions, regardless of whether he thought the answers were right or wrong. He did, and he passed. He graduated from Vanderbilt Law School in 1966, married and passed the bar exam that summer. His marriage produced 2 children, David Young Parker Jr. and Deborah. Lesson learned: do not give up when at first you do not succeed, whether it is school, tests, or litigation. Each spring in the 1960s, the then law school dean, John Wade, prepared a booklet with a photo of every law school graduate with a small bio for each student. The dean circulated the booklet to all the law firms in Tennessee, asserting that every VUL graduate was highly qualified. As a result, Howell, Haines, Lusk, and Foster in Chattanooga invited David for an interview and hired him as an associate on August the 1st, 1966. He started at $450 per month, plus 50% of everything he brought in, which was nothing. But then David had learned 1 or 2 other lessons from his clerkship with Mr. Tanner, a tough disciplinarian. Early one morning, David was writing a brief while sitting at Mr. Tanner's desk. When Mr. Tanner came in and saw David behind his desk, he asked, "What are you doing behind my desk?" David responding, "Taking care of you like I'm supposed to do." Mr. Tanner replied, "And what do you think a client would think if they saw you sitting at my desk?" Although David did not foresee that a client would think anything about it, he was to learn otherwise. That is, how you present yourself to your clients makes a big difference. Lesson learned, clients expect professionalism. Mr. Tanner also gave David a word of advice that served him well throughout the years. Don't ever go into the afternoon chasing your overhead. You make your overhead in the morning. One partner of the firm represented the Jim Walters Corporation. He handled all the clients' title searches for $25 a search and assigned David to run from county to county each day to do these searches, a tedious, lengthy process involving large deed, tax, and lien books. Regardless of the time involved, sometimes driving into North Georgia or North Alabama, David had to perform the searches even though the clerks would tell him that the titles were good. And they always were. David paid his own travel expenses while the searches consumed his time for little financial return. At that time, Chattanooga had no public defenders, and judges frequently appointed new lawyers to represent criminal defendants for little or no remuneration. As a court-appointed defense lawyer, David aggressively represented his criminal clients and earned a good reputation in the trial courts, but little else. Within a few months at the law firm, he sensed something was amiss. On February the 12th, 1967, his first child was born. About 2 days later, the partners called David into the conference room and told him that the firm was terminating their relationship with him. David was scared to death. He had been hired on August the 1st, 1966, and fired in February 1967. David considered getting fired a mark of shame. You just didn't get fired back then. David asked if he could have another chance. He was told a resounding no. One partner, Mr. Lusk, a Virginia Law School graduate, asked David, "Didn't they teach you at Vanderbilt what you're good at? You're a good criminal lawyer, but you will never be a partner in this law firm." Lesson learned. Even when you're working hard and getting good results, you may not please an employer focused on other outcomes. He managed then to find a job at Provident Life and Accident Insurance Company, one of the 3 major insurance companies in Chattanooga. He was not happy with that position and reached out to Vanderbilt Placement Office and learned of an opening for a lawyer in the State Welfare Department, now the Tennessee Department of Human Services. In July '74, he was living in New York City as a Genesco lawyer. David next encountered Ralph Lauren, a New York City fashion designer who was heavily in debt to Genesco. David collected that debt. In 1975, after a few years in Genesco's corporate department, David went into private practice in Lafayette, Macon County, Tennessee. David's clients, Genesco, the Crystal Company, and International Telephone Company, came to him through his experience, his hard work, his determination, and his ability to produce good results. He one day received a telephone call. "This is Frank Sawyers. How would you like to start representing the Crystal Company?" David said, "I think I can work that in." Mr. Sawyers explained what the company wanted. "Here's one thing. David, you are street smart and you're mean, and that's exactly what we're looking for. We have these big labor firms down in Atlanta, and we will send stuff down there and ask them a question, can we do this? 4 days later, they write us a letter. No, you can't do that. Well, son, we knew that before we sent it down there. That's why we sent it down there. We wanted them to tell us how we could do it." Lesson learned. A client wants a lawyer to craft the right answer for it. Second lesson learned, relationships matter in practicing law, and they matter in life. When David first made his first trip to the offices of International Telephone on Thursday, March the 20th, 1984, he thought he would be assigned one case. Upon entering the Industrial Relations Manager's office, he saw the manager reading a letter from their local lawyer who got his nose out of joint because the company had taken that one case away from him and given it to David. The manager said, "You know what? You're going to get every one of our cases. David had to have a dolly to roll them all out of the office, file after file after file. David had secured a very important client because he had handled a difficult case successfully with no other expectations. Lesson learned. A lawyer who complains to the client soon does not have a client. Then he started representing Little Debbie snack cakes. John Reynolds and David were quite close friends. John recalls, outside of the courthouse, I best remember David, his friend and interesting conversationalist. We enjoyed lunches at Demos, which unfortunately, and like so many other businesses, no longer maintains a presence downtown. My own conversations with David revolved around Nashville and American history and politics, and facts concerning Nashville, Tennessee lawyers that David had picked up from his associations through the years. John Reynolds continued, late afternoon conversations were most enjoyable, even though David did not drink. We tried to avoid talking about cases and the law. He enjoyed conversation about current events. He often forwarded articles of interest from newspapers. David had many friends at the courthouse in many counties. He was well known and respected, as I learned when we visited contiguous counties together. David was well read. He could talk about literature, history, and especially American history, and our favorite subject, which was baseball. He enjoyed talking about his childhood and the Chattanooga Lookouts and the coaches and players who visited his father's drugstore. He remembered names and statistics. He had accumulated a great collection of sports memorabilia and paraphernalia, and especially all wool jerseys and pants and jackets of Major League Baseball teams, even the St. Louis Browns. He proudly displayed these in his office and in some instances explained the history of the uniform and the reason for his purchase to friends and visitors. The last message from David in my file reads, Friday, October the 9th, 2020, 11:52 a.m., subject, Whitey Ford is dead. David. My response was, oh my goodness. David also had other interests, especially trains. Each holiday season, he would set up and display his electric model trains in the large anteroom of his office on 2nd Avenue. The trains ran on tracks like those most boys would hope to receive for Christmas. The scene was visible through the large front window and entertained many pedestrians. Beginning in 1995, David devoted time to the NBA Historical Committee and gained a reputation for preparing memorial resolutions for deceased lawyers. His impetus was the collection of condolence letters that his mother had received and preserved. After she died, he found a little packet of letters tied with a blue ribbon received by his mother and father after their infant son died in 1936. He began to send condolence notes to lawyers who experienced similar losses. David became chairman of the committee and found it one of the most interesting bar committees with its focus on the Nashville legal history, its colorful lawyers, and the numerous changes in the practice of law. Lesson learned, a lawyer has time for other lawyers. David took cases that were hard because he did not want to fail. He worked diligently to earn his overhead and then some. He made friends throughout his life that lasted a lifetime. He invested in buildings that no one wanted and was rewarded with a bountiful return. He volunteered with the Bar Association and honored many other lawyers. He wanted to be remembered as an honest and truthful lawyer, a scholar, an upright man, a good person who was good to other people. Lesson learned. An honest, truthful, scholar, and upright good man provides us all with a blueprint for a life well lived as a solo practitioner. In closing this remembrance, perhaps there is not a more fitting summation than to quote a poem by Jack Norman Sr., with which Mr. Herb Rich closed that worthy man's eulogy in this very place. It was used as well in Mr. Rich's memorial resolution prepared by this committee. David Parker was one of the signatories of that resolution. It fits David Young Parker Sr. equally well. Just sitting here in my chair, nodding and thinking about all the years that have gone before, and in between the thoughts and blinking, I try to figure up the final score. I came to know many who were good. I also knew many who were mean. I knew many I never understood, and there were many in between. I have known the bitter and the sweet during all the years of my life. The thrill of victory and the pain of defeat have always mixed success with strife. I have seen beauty in many ways and the ugly all along the line. I've seen heartbreak on many days and simple goodness of every kind. But in total, I think I can say that the good outweighed the bad. So I am grateful for the way God fashioned the life that I have had. David Young Parker died January the 23rd, 2021, of complications from COVID-19. He will be sorely missed by all of his colleagues who had the joy of knowing him and the distinct honor of having him pass on his wisdom and experience as a mentor to younger lawyers, just as he had learned to practice law now over 50 years ago. Now, therefore, we, the undersigned members of the committee designated to memorialize the life and memory of David Young Parker, Sr., respectfully make this motion to this Honorable Chancery Court for the 20th Judicial District of Tennessee, that this resolution be accepted and spread upon the pages of the in memoriam book kept for that purpose, to the end that the memory of our friend and colleague will forever be perpetuated in the permanent record of the profession he served so long and so well. This 18th day of November, 2021, respectfully submitted, the Honorable Carol L. McCoy, Paul R. White, John R. Reynolds, the Honorable Claudia Bonneman, the Honorable Ben H. Cantrell, Evelina Cheadle, L.R. Ralph DeMarco, and Keith Turner.
The memorial resolutions for both Thomas Holman Jr. and Robert Covington will be presented by Nancy Corley.
May it please the court. Presenting these two resolutions are very personal for me. Tom Holman, it was in his class that it ignited my love of the law and affirmed that being a lawyer was what I was supposed to be. And in 1972, he hired me as an associate in his law firm, and with a 6 months old, he let me work a flex schedule, which you have to say was not usual in Nashville legal community in 1972. And Robert Covington, I have known my entire life. His mother was my music teacher, and he and two of his friends were responsible for giving me my local nickname in Paris of Brat. So both of these are very personal. The memorial resolution for Thomas Irvin Holman Jr. Nashville lawyer Thomas Irvin Holman Jr. died August the 6th, 2020 in Danville, Kentucky at the age of 98. Holman's beloved wife Shelley Fitch Holman predeceased him in 2014. He is survived by his son, Thomas Irvin Holman III of Montgomery Village, Maryland. His daughters, Mary Jean Holman of Orlando, Florida, and Shelley Holman Bigelow of Danville, Kentucky, 5 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild. Holman was born October the 23rd, 1921 in Springfield, Tennessee, was a graduate of Springfield High School, class of 1939, Cumberland College in Lebanon, Tennessee, the University of Tennessee College of Law in 1943, also earning a Bachelor of Laws from Emory University in 1947. He was admitted to both the Tennessee and Georgia bar. He served in the United States Army from 1942 to 1946 as a military policeman and second lieutenant, and as an assistant adjutant and personnel officer in Manila, Philippines from 1945 to 1946. He was a partner in the Nashville law firm of Stevenson, Lackey, and Holman, where he practiced for many years with J. Stevenson, J.G. Lackey, Tom Shriver, and many others, including that young female lawyer with 3 pre-kindergarten children whom he hired, remained her mentor, valued colleague, and trusted friend. He was a longtime faculty member at the YMCA Night Law School, now the Nashville College of Law, where he taught the dreaded first-year real property class a la the paper chase Socratic method. You did not want to be unprepared when he called on you in his class. He was later named the president of First Federal Savings and Loan Association, CEO of Metropolitan Federal Savings and Loan Association, and president of the Tennessee Savings and Loan Association. For 40 years, he and his wife Shelley, who was also a lawyer, proofread all the laws that were passed by the Tennessee State Legislature before they were codified in Tennessee Code Annotated. Holman's motto was, "Be determined." And being determined enabled him to survive the Great Depression, World War II, several bouts with cancer, 17 presidential administrations, some Republican, and he was a proud, unabashed yellow dog Democrat, and other challenges, giving him an invaluable perspective on life and the law. Being determined also enabled him to be prosperous and successful in the military, the legal profession, the savings and loan industry, and life in general. His intelligence and curiosity were notable throughout his life, and he never stopped learning, even tackling and mastering the iPad at age 98. Therefore, be it resolved by the Nashville Bar Association that we honor the life, work, and legacy of our colleague, teacher, and friend, Thomas Irvin Holman, Jr., and mourn in his passing. Be it further resolved that this memorial resolution be placed in the permanent records of the association and entered in the immemorial minute book of the Chancery Court of Davidson County, Tennessee, and that copies thereof be furnished to the members of his family. Approved for entry, Nancy Crider Corley, John H. Rowe Jr., Jack W. Robinson Sr., and Jimmy G. Creasy. Memorial resolution for Robert Bob Newman Covington. Robert Newman Covington, former professor at Vanderbilt Law School, passed away on November 29, 2020, at the age of 84 years. He was predeceased by his parents and his brother Milton, and survived by his wife, Paula Ann Covington, who is a subject librarian for Latin American and Iberian students and a senior lecturer in Latin American Studies at Vanderbilt. Robert was born in the small West Tennessee town of Paris, Henry County, the son of a classically trained pianist and a railroad man. He attended E.W. Grove High School in Paris, Tennessee, where he excelled in forensics and debate, representing Tennessee at the National Forensic League National Tournament. He was also an accomplished musician and played almost all of the instruments as needed in the Grove High School band, from clarinet to tuba. He excelled in the piano and played everything from classical music to jazz. And he was also valedictorian of his high school graduating class. Bob received his undergraduate degree from Yale University in 1958 before earning his law degree from Vanderbilt University Law School in 1961. Vanderbilt offered him a teaching fellowship, and he served as a research fellow at Vanderbilt Law immediately after graduation until he accepted an offer to join the law faculty permanently when the fellowship ended. Robert taught labor and employment law for 46 years until his retirement in 2007. He received Vanderbilt's Thomas Jefferson Award in 1992, and when the law school was expanded and renovated in the early 2000s, they named a room, the Covington Room, in his honor. In addition to his recognized expertise in labor law, he also published books and articles on evidence, insurance, legal method, and legal education over the course of his distinguished career. He continued to publish after assuming emeritus status, authorizing the third edition of Employment Law in a Nutshell and co-authoring the fourth edition of Legal Protection for the Individual Employee. His university service included chairing the faculty senate, serving as president of the university club, supporting the OSHA Lifelong Learning Institute, and directing and singing in the faculty choir. And even after death, he continues to support our community through the Covington Quality of Life Fund at the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee, which supports in death the things he loved in life: the Nashville Symphony, Nashville Opera, Nashville Ballet, and the Frist Art Museum. Therefore, be it resolved by the Nashville Bar Association that we honor the life, work, and legacy of our colleague, teacher, and friend, Robert Bob Newman Covington, and mourn in his passing. Be it further resolved that this memorial resolution be placed in the permanent records of the association and entered in the immemorial minute book of the Chancery Court of Davidson County, Tennessee, and that copies be furnished to the members of his family. Approved for entry, Nancy Crider Corley and G. Ray Busey.
The memorial resolution for Judge Jerry Smith will be presented by Patricia Cottrell.
Judge Jerry Smith died on February 12, 2021, leaving behind family, friends, and colleagues who miss his intellect, his wit, and his humanity. He also left behind a legacy of lawyers he trained and opinions he wrote that have added greatly to the development of law in this state. Born in 1953 in Etowah, Tennessee, Jerry cherished his family's Irish roots and his East Tennessee childhood spent near the Hiwassee River. At Jerry would say, at McMinn County Central High School, he was class president, excelling in academics, particularly history, an outstanding thespian. He starred as a prosecutor in a gripping courtroom drama, a foretaste of things to come. His favorite extracurricular activity was sitting on a front porch after school and just talking to people, another portent for the future. He graduated with honors from the University of Tennessee before attending the University of Tennessee College of Law, graduating in 1978. In 1982, he joined the Office of the Attorney General in Nashville as an Assistant Attorney General. By 1985, he had risen to Deputy Attorney General of the Criminal Justice Division, where he served the state of Tennessee for the next 10 years, developing a deep knowledge of our criminal justice system. As deputy, he oversaw and managed attorneys handling criminal appeals in the state. He became the state expert on extradition and served as president of the National Association of Extradition Officials and was a member of the Sixth Circuit Task Force on Capital Cases and the Tennessee Sentencing Commission. At the Attorney General's office, Jerry was known for his insight and humor. He was a great colleague and often played a starring role in entertainment for retreats and other gatherings. A zealous advocate as the state's lawyer, Jerry nevertheless recognized that prosecutors have the duty to seek justice and to treat fairly all persons coming before the courts. The pinnacle of Jerry's career was his appointment to the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals in 1995. And he continued his service to the people of Tennessee in that role until his retirement in 2014. On the court, he continued his commitment to fair-mindedness and dedication to the rule of law. During oral argument, Jerry would ask tough questions and engage in good-natured banter with attorneys. Other court members appreciated his collegial approach and his intellectual curiosity. They also appreciated his ability to provide entertaining stories. Judge Jerry Smith taught criminal law to hundreds of students at the Nashville School of Law for many years and liked nothing more than watching his former students succeed. These professional accomplishments in no way define the whole of Jerry Lynn Smith. He was known for his humor, which he shared freely. His facile wit was a product of his nimble intellect and his understanding of people. Jerry was the consummate storyteller. People would sit entranced as he regaled them with tales from Etowah, from UT, from law practice, and life. Others would try to repeat those stories, but usually saying, "Jerry told it much better." Jerry never met a stranger and was a friend to many. His friendship was to be valued. He was the kind of true friend who would tell you what you needed to hear, even if it wasn't what you wanted to hear. Jerry had many loves. First and foremost was his wife, Elizabeth Owen, who is here today, who was truly his partner, sharing spirited discussions, a love of cooking, travel adventures, and good times with cherished friends. Most importantly, they made each other laugh a lot. Jerry also loved knowledge. He loved to learn new things and studied history voraciously, becoming expert on the Civil War and World War II. Elizabeth described it as living with Wikipedia. He loved political arguments. A born debater, Jerry's interest and knowledge of government and politics was global. He loved fishing. He admitted fish had nothing to fear from him. He loved the balls, and like his fishing attempts, he suffered disappointment in this also. But he never gave up on either. He loved his many cats, relishing in picking the perfect name for each one. He loved to travel, especially with Elizabeth, enjoying new places, trying out the language, sampling the food, absorbing the history, and making new friends. And he loved justice, tempered with mercy. Those of us who knew Jerry well will miss the light he brought to our lives, his generous spirit, and the common sense of a small-town Tennessee boy that he never lost. Therefore, be it resolved that we honor the life, work, and legacy of our colleague, Jerry L. Smith. Be it further resolved that this memorial resolution be placed in the permanent records of the association and entered into the in memoriam minute book of the Chancery Court of Davidson County, Tennessee, and that copies thereof be furnished to his family. Thank you.
The memorial resolution for Judge William Feyman will be presented by Judge Aaron Holt.
May it please the court, this is the memorial resolution for Judge William Joseph Feyman, who passed away on January 23rd of this year. Judge Fehmann was a graduate of Father Ryan High School, Notre Dame University, and the Vanderbilt School of Law. He's survived by his wife of over 60 years, Peggy Fehmann, son Terry Fehmann, and his wife Karen, 3 grandchildren, Blake Fehmann, Caitlin Mott, and Megan Fehmann, and a great-grandchild, Aurora Fehmann. Judge Fehmann practiced law for a number of years before his election as General Sessions Judge The firm that he was a member of was Summers, Jennings, Frazier, and Feyman. Judge Feyman dedicated much of his adult life to public service. He served as a captain in the United States Air Force and worked for the CIA after graduating from law school. In 1982, he was elected judge of the General Sessions Court for Davidson County, Tennessee. He was re-elected in 1990 and in 98 before retiring from that position in 2006. Judge Fehmann held a variety of other jobs during his lifetime before entering the field of law. He was a spiker for the Rock Island Railroad, a bricklayer's assistant, and a service station attendant. His life was full of activities outside his legal career. He was a full-time member of the Hooligans, the Knights of Columbus, St. Patrick Church, and a devoted volunteer at St. Thomas Hospital. And after his retirement working at St. Thomas Hospital, he helped thousands of people in that position. He was there and loved that work. He loved baseball. He was an avid fan of the St. Louis Cardinals. He coached Little League Baseball and participated in activities of Nashville Old Timers Baseball, including attending regularly their annual banquet. He enjoyed playing golf. He was a huge fan of all Notre Dame athletic teams. In his professional life, he was a member of the Nashville and American Bar Associations. He was a member of the American Judges Association, Lawyers Association for Women. He served two terms on the board of directors for the Nashville Bar Association, 1965 to 1968, and 1991 to 94. Moreover, Judge Fehmann served on the Tennessee Judicial Council and the State Judicial Ethics Committee. He was the presiding judge of Davidson County General Sessions Court from 1988 to 1989. Judge Fehmann was the chairman of Mayor Bredesen's task force, which led to the establishment of Domestic Violence Division of the Metropolitan Police Department. And for his work, Judge Fehmann was recognized with an award of appreciation from the Domestic Violence Advocacy Team. Even though he had all the accomplished work he did in law for the community, he had one pronounced fear. And as his family relates, Judge Fehmann was a fear of snakes, even harmless ones. And as the story goes, after Judge Fehmann and Peggy moved into their first and only residence, Judge Fehmann, while doing some outside work with a pickaxe, suddenly saw a harmless black snake. In his haste to end the snake's life, he got the pickaxe tangled in some tree branches and wound up flat on his back as the snake slithered away, much to the judge's dismay. Once Judge Fehmann was on the bench, he was fair and thoughtful with a very calm demeanor. He was very insightful, and as District Attorney General Funk recalls, Judge Fehmann had an uncanny ability to spot an exaggeration or untruth, whether from the mouth of a litigant or an attorney. Whenever a statement caused Judge Fehmann's face to break into a wry smile, you knew that his radar had been activated, and he was about to cock his head to one side and interrupt the speaker with a low, slow, guttural, "I don't know about that." The best part was that he could make these calls on the spot and in such a way as to preserve the dignity of the witness or attorney. And then, hearing the case, would continue with that individual chastised but able to proceed that he was a great judge, and Nashville was fortunate to have his service. Opie's story, Judge Feynman's longtime court officer, recalls that even the calm and collected Judge Fehmann has on one occasion dealt with some unusual occurrences. Opie recalls that Christmas time, after Judge Fehmann was elected, he was presiding over a very crowded traffic docket. People filled the benches waiting to have their traffic citations heard or resolved. All of a sudden, a wound-up Santa Claus doll comes toddling down the middle aisle singing a Merry Christmas tune much to the delight of the assembled masses. Oprah recalls that Judge Feyman, even though surprised and stunned, continued on with his usual calmness and good spirit. It's still apparently a well-kept secret, but who was the culprit behind the Christmas surprise? Judge Fehmann brought integrity, fairness, and calm decisiveness to the proceedings of the Davidson County General Sessions Court. His contributions to the court and to the Davidson County community of law as a whole will be long remembered. Be it therefore resolved by the National Bar Association that we honor the life and work of Judge William Bill Feyman and mourn his passing. Be it further resolved that the memorial resolution be placed in the permanent records of the association and entered on the immemorial minute book of the Chancery Court for Davidson County, Tennessee, and that copies thereof be furnished to the Judge Feyman's family. Approved for entry, Judge Eisenstein, Judge Gil Robinson, Judge Bill Higgins, Judge Rachel Bell, Judge Linda Jones, Judge Sam Coleman, Judge Aaron Holt, Judge Melissa Blackburn, Judge Anna Escobar, Judge Allegra Walker, Judge Diane Turner, and Judge Michael Mondelli.
The memorial resolution for Robert Bobby Jackson will be presented by Lee Jackson.
May it please the court, my name is Robert Lee Jackson II, and along with my father, Todd Jackson, and brother Mark Jackson, who are both here today, it is my honor to present this memorial resolution for Bobby Jackson, my grandfather. Bobby was born on December 20th, 1941 in Nashville, Tennessee. He attended Vanderbilt University and became one of the first persons to graduate in 1965 from a special program that allowed him to complete both degrees in the undergraduate school and law school in 6 years as opposed to 7 years. Bobby started his 55-year-long career with his father, Eugene D. Jackson Jr., from 1965 until 1977 in the Nashville law firm known as Jackson, Tanner, and Reynolds, and then with his son, Robert Todd Jackson, from 1989 until 1998 in the law firm known as Jackson and Associates. He continued his private practice until his death on February 15th, 2021. Bobby was known as a fearless advocate for his clients and became a legend to many lawyers, jurists, and his clients during that time. He was one of the first Nashville lawyers to be named one of the, quote, best lawyers in America by the organization and publication in the 1980s, and his legal practice was also named one of the, quote, best law firms in the city by U.S. News and World Report. Bobby was proud to have earned an AV rating from Martindale-Hubbell, the highest possible rating in both legal ability and ethical standards in the profession based on peer review only. With his passing on February 15th, 2021, Nashville in the Middle Tennessee area lost one of its most experienced and finest legal minds. Bobby was the fifth of 7 consecutive generations of Jackson men to practice law in the state of Tennessee since the approximately 1850s. Throughout his career, Bobby was a mentor to many of Nashville's finest lawyers and jurists. In the last 2 decades, he became one of the best mediators with more than 2,000 cases in family law matters in Nashville and the Middle Tennessee area, and was affectionately known as the closer due to his ability to resolve contentious matters between parties going through divorces and post-divorce issues. Bobby was a lawyer's lawyer and represented many lawyers in their own personal family law matters throughout his career. Bobby was one of the most personable and charming men to be around, so much so that even after a long day of mediation, attorneys would stay around for a celebratory drink just to spend more time with him. For those of us that knew Bobby not only as one of Nashville's premier attorneys, but also as granddad, will always remember the love he had for his family. This was never more evident than the annual family Christmas celebration hosted by Bobby and his wife Sherry at their home. It was here that Bobby would spare no expense in bringing joy to his family with gifts, food, decorations, holiday music playing over his jukebox, and the occasional celebrity guest, including Santa Claus. Like so many members of the bar in Middle Tennessee, Bobby's family will be forever grateful for the love and joy that Bobby brought to their life. We respectfully request that this memorial resolution be adopted by the Chancery Court of Davidson County, Tennessee, and spread upon the minutes of the memorial book of this court. Thank you.
The memorial resolution for James Robinson Jr. will be presented by R. Alex Dickerson.
May it please the court. James Earl Robinson Jr. was born on Christmas Day in 1979 and died on May 18, 2021, from complications related to COVID-19, which he contracted only a few days before he was scheduled to be vaccinated. James was an assistant metropolitan attorney for the city of Nashville. He was 41 years old. James spent his entire legal career at Metro, where he was an accomplished litigator defending the city and its employees in Davidson County Circuit Court. His coworkers often tapped into his wealth of legal knowledge to inform their own cases, knowing that James would always take a genuine intellectual curiosity of the issue presented, consider it thoroughly, express an unobtrusive opinion, and probably even thank you for asking his thoughts. Despite his modest demeanor, James was a bit of a social butterfly. He was often found hanging out in the doorways of his coworkers, ready to talk about the things that most interested them. He never missed a chance to suggest a work lunch or happy hour, and regularly attended any out-of-office events that allowed him to be close to us, his people. James will be remembered for his kindness, his positive demeanor, his ability to connect with anyone, his great sense of humor, and for some rather terrible puns. Although it is a worn cliche, James died much too young. He had more knowledge to impart, more jokes to tell, more restaurants to patronize, and more goodness to be. He became incapacitated early in his illness, and for those of us who never got a chance to say goodbye, we'd all like to tell him that we loved him. And that we're sorry we didn't tell him that in person. And James is survived by his mother Maxine, a sister Tracy, a brother Kevin, several aunts, uncles, nieces, and nephews, by my 3-month-old daughter who bears his name, by a heartbroken office, and by every person who's ever had any meaningful contact with him. Therefore, be it resolved by the National Bar Association that we honor the life and work of James Earl Robinson Jr. and mourn his passing.
The memorial resolution for Larry Snedeker will be presented by James Price.
May it please the court. This is the memorial resolution for Larry Haines Snedeker. Larry Snedeker passed away on June 4, 2021 at his home in South Alabama, surrounded by his family and friends. Larry was a fierce advocate for his clients, a noted businessman, respected by his clients, community, and his law partners. Larry was born in Springfield, Missouri on September 28, 1946. He graduated from Hillcrest High School in Springfield, Missouri, where he excelled both in academics and athletics. He attended Jury College in Springfield on a basketball scholarship, where he met his future wife, Candace Haines, who recently and shortly preceded him in death. Upon graduation, Larry entered the United States Army as a second lieutenant. After discharge from the United States Army, Larry attended Vanderbilt Law School, graduating in 1971. It was then, after graduation, he was hired as an attorney with the Metropolitan Government Legal Department. Larry left the Metropolitan Legal Department to become a founding member of the firm of Butley, Lackey, Holtz, and Snedeker, later to become Lackey, Rogers, Price, and Snedeker. It was at that time that he became Chief of Staff for the Metropolitan Council, a position he held until 1986. As Chief of Staff, he was responsible for drafting all of the legislation for Metro and ruling in all procedural matters at council meetings. He was a familiar face at televised council meetings, sitting to the right of the vice mayor, passing notes and rendering advice. Larry had a lifelong passion for golf, which began at his family's driving range in Springfield, Missouri. This passion for golf was passed on to his son, Haines, who attended Ole Miss on a golf scholarship and became a lawyer like Larry. His second son, Brent, attended Vanderbilt University on a golf scholarship and became a PGA Tour professional. Larry could be seen nearly all his off time at a golf course. It was during a golf tournament where he met Ray Downer, then chairman of the board of Shoney's Restaurants. This meeting began his lifelong friendship, resulting in becoming Mr. Downer's personal attorney as well as his associate in many business dealings. As Larry's business outside of the practice of law grew, he began to reduce his practice of law. In 2005, he retired from practice altogether and retired to South Alabama. Larry's devotion to his clients, his community, made this community richer, and it is poorer by his passing. Therefore, be it resolved by the Nashville Bar Association that we honor the life and work of Larry Haines Snedeker and mourn his passing. Be it further resolved that this memorial be placed on the permanent records of the association and into the memorial minute book of the Chancery Court of Davidson County, Tennessee, and copies be furnished to his sons, Haines and Brent.
The memorial resolution for Donald Fish Sr. will be presented by George Bishop.
May it please the court, this is the memorial resolution for Donald Winston Fish Sr. With the death of Donald Winston Fish Sr. in June of this year, the Nashville Bar lost a fine lawyer and a finer man. Born in Nashville in 1930, Don graduated from David Lipscomb High School and the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. He then joined the U.S. Navy and was stationed in Brunswick, Georgia. While on leave back in Nashville, he met Sally Lever. They soon were wed and remained married for the next 67 years. Following his honorable discharge from the Navy, Don worked for a time in Pennsylvania before entering Vanderbilt Law School. After graduation, he was employed by Life of Georgia in Atlanta and then joined Hospital Corporation of America in 1969. Don served as HCA's first general counsel and secretary for the next 25 years. During this time, he skillfully managed all of HCA's legal affairs as it grew from a startup company to a significant factor in our nation's healthcare system and a dominant force in the Middle Tennessee economy. After leaving HCA, Don joined the Nashville firm of Waller, Lanston, Dortch, and Davis, where for several years he provided valuable counsel to its clients and management. Apart from his extraordinary legal career, Don made many valuable contributions to the Nashville community. He was an active member of the West End Church of Christ, serving as an elder there for over 30 years. Don also served on the Board of Trustees of Lipscomb University and the Board of Directors of Agape Nashville, and was a Williamson County Commissioner. As a trustee of the Bill Wilkerson Center, he helped facilitate its merger with Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Don was also an avid aviator. As such, he volunteered for Lifeline pilots using his own airplane to transport passengers with medical needs. Upon retirement, Don continued to lead a full and active life. He remained a pillar of his church and pursued his hobbies of photography and boating. He and Sally also spent many happy days at their retreat in St. Simon's Island. Nothing, however, was more important to Don than his family. In addition to Sally, he was devoted to his children, Deborah and Don Jr., and his granddaughters, Amelia and Evelyn. In addition to his children and grandchildren, he is survived by his sisters, Marian Ezell and Martha Fish, as well as numerous nieces and nephews. Donald Winston Fish Sr. was a perfect gentleman. He had an exceptional intellect and a wonderful sense of humor. He respected and was respected by all those he encountered. He will be greatly missed by his family, friends, and former colleagues. Therefore, be it resolved by the Nashville Bar Association that in the life and record of Donald Winston Fish, Sr., we and the city of Nashville generally have been honored and blessed, and in his passing we have sustained a great loss. That this memorial resolution be placed in the permanent records of the association and entered on the in memoriam minute book of the Chancery Court of Davidson County, and that copies hereof be furnished to the members of Mr. Fish's family. Respectfully submitted this 18th day of November 2021 by George Bishop, Robert E. Boston, Ames Davis, and James Reginald Hill. Thank you.
The memorial resolution for Jerry Humphreys will be presented by Pete Cantrell.
May it please the court, this is the memorial resolution for Jerry Ralph Humphreys. Jerry Ralph Humphreys, born December the 29th, 1941 in Chattanooga. He died July the 3rd, 2021 in Nashville. He was preceded in death by his parents, Ralph and Mattie Humphreys. Jerry grew up in Chattanooga and graduated from Chattanooga Central High School. After his marriage and graduation, he enlisted in the United States Air Force. He completed basic training and was stationed at Lakeland Air Force Base, San Antonio, Texas, where his two sons were born. Upon completing his tour of duty, he returned to Chattanooga and enrolled in college at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. After graduation, Jerry became an adjuster with Liberty Mutual Insurance Company in Nashville, Tennessee, where he also enrolled as a student at the Nashville School of Law, graduating with his JD degree in 1971. Upon passing the bar examination, Jerry became an associate with Ed Davies, Thomas O. H. Smith Jr., and myself in the practice of law. Later, Jerry was one of the founding members in the firm of Davies, Cantrell, Humphreys, and McCoy, where he practiced the greater portion of his legal career. Excuse me. The majority of Jerry's legal life was as a defense attorney. He earned a reputation as a competent, thorough litigator who prepared his witnesses for trial and who was knowledgeable in the law. Jerry also had the unique ability to reasonably evaluate his client's exposure. He used all of his attributes to represent his clients professionally and within the high ethical standards of the legal profession. Jerry's friends, as well as his adversaries, considered him the typical Southern gentleman, a gentleman most graciously and mannerly to everyone he met, both adversaries and clients. Jerry was an honest lawyer, true to his word, and when he made a certain assertion, you could go to the bank with it. Jerry loved the practice of law and used his desires to serve others by volunteering on the board of directors with Donaldson Christian Academy. He was an active member, also an active member with Hermitage Hills Baptist Church. Although Jerry was dedicated to the practice of law, his activities with the church and with Donaldson Christian Academy, his greatest love and devotion centered on his family, Evelyn, his high school sweetheart and wife of 62 and a half years, his sons, Jerry Jr. and Christopher, and his grandchildren, Ryan, Jay, Caleb, Lindsay, and Kelsey, in addition to his 8 great-grandchildren. I suppose we ought to tell a little bit, about his bad character, whatever you want to call it. So I just want you to know that Jerry was an avid football fan of both Tennessee Titans and the University of Tennessee. However, when attending a game, especially at the University of Tennessee, he had the bad habit, if toward the end of a game it became apparent Tennessee was either winning or losing, and the game only had a few minutes to play, he would leave in order to avoid the crowd. He had returned to his automobile, also to be ahead of traffic returning to Nashville. I personally call that a flaw in character. This flaw manifested itself when Jerry was attending a game between Tennessee and Arkansas. With approximately 5 minutes remaining in the game, the Tennessee was losing. Arkansas had possession of the ball, and Jerry, true to form, proceeded to leave the game. After departing the stadium and nearing Cumberland Avenue, suddenly there was a roar erupting from the stadium, a roar so loud that it was exceeded only by the roar heard ending World War II. Jerry did not know the reason, as he did not have either a cell phone or a portable radio. There was not a fan or a person in the vicinity to tell him what happened. It was not until he was in traffic that he learned that Tennessee won the game because the Arkansas quarterback had fumbled the ball. Tennessee recovered it and went on to win the game. In leaving, Jerry failed to see one of the most important and exciting plays of the year, the play that enabled UT to continue its march to the 1998 National Football title. However, we should overlook this minor injudicious flaw. Therefore, be it resolved that we honor the work and legacy of our colleague Jerry Ralph Humphreys. Be it further resolved this memorial resolution be placed in the permanent records of the Nashville Bar Association and entered in the in memoriam minute book of the Chancery Court of Davidson County, and copies thereof be furnished to his family. This 18th day of November 2021, respectfully submitted, Carol McCoy and Luther Campbell.
The memorial resolution for Jeffrey Kowalski will be presented by Michael Ponce.
May it please the court. The memorial resolution for Jeffrey Collier Kowalski. Today we mourn the passing of Jeffrey Collier Kowalski. Jeff Kowalski passed from this life this past July, leaving behind his wife Christine Chandler, his son Parker Kowalski, and two daughters, Caitlin Kowalski and Lillian Chandler, and his parents Gerald and Sandra Kowalski. Jeffrey Kowalski was born on August the 27th, 1972 in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, where his parents were both teachers at Bass Memorial Academy. While in elementary school, his family relocated to Saranac, New York, but by the time he was ready to begin his freshman year in high school, his family had moved to Apopka, Florida, where Jeffrey attended Forest Lake Academy in Apopka. After graduating from Forest Lake Academy, Jeff attended Southern Adventist University in Collegedale, Tennessee. And while pursuing his undergraduate degree, Jeff was appointed Student Association Senate Judiciary Committee and was also on both the Dean's List and honor roll for 7 consecutive semesters before graduating with honors with a bachelor's in business administration and marketing and a minor in English in May of 1995. Jeff also received an Associate of Applied Science and Legal Assisting from the Chattanooga State Technical Community College in the year 2000. Jeff worked as a litigation paralegal at McCune, Billings, Gold, and Presley in Chattanooga, Tennessee until May of 2001. And in 2001, Jeff began as a litigation paralegal at the McMahon Law Firm in Chattanooga, Tennessee. In 2006, Jeff relocated to Nashville, Tennessee in order to attend law school at the Nashville School of Law. Jeff attended law school at night while working at Ponce Law during the day. In 2008, he graduated from the Nashville School of Law, finishing in the top 5% of his class. And in 2009, he passed the bar and was promoted to the head of the Social Security Department at Ponce Law. Jeff continued to work and grow his department until 2015. Jeff was a skilled plaintiff's attorney and was awarded an AV as preeminent award from Martindale Hubbell. In 2015, Jeffrey left Ponce Law in order to start his own law firm, the law office of Jeffrey Kowalski, located in White House, Tennessee, which focused on personal injury, Social Security disability claims, and other litigation. Jeff Kowalski faithfully and professionally and zealously represented his clients until his passing earlier this year. Jeff was a pleasure to work with. He was a reliable team member, and he was always willing to help out. He had a wonderful sense of humor. He was an avid cyclist, a passion that he and I both shared, and he raced competitively in his youth. Jeff also loved outings and travel with his family and had a special affinity for the outdoors, camping, horseback riding, and hiking. He was an incredible resource and a mentor for many new attorneys, and he never hesitated to share his knowledge and experience with newer members of the bar. He was not only appreciated, but in fact loved by his clients, and he spent his entire life advocating for the disadvantaged members of our community, many of which suffered from mental illnesses, and he did this with compassion and with patience. Jeff was deeply loved by his family and cherished by his children, and he is greatly missed by them, as well as his friends, colleagues, clients, and everyone who had the privilege of knowing him. Therefore, be it resolved by the Nashville Bar Association that we honor the life and work of Jeffrey Collier Kowalski and mourn his passing and the loss of a keen mind, a caring spirit, and a true student of the law who sought justice and represented the highest aspirations of the law. Be it further resolved that this memorial resolution be placed in the permanent records of the association and entered in the immemorial minute book of the Chancery Court of Davidson County, Tennessee, and that copies be furnished to the surviving members of his family, including Christine Chandler, his parents Gerald and Sandra Kowalski, and his children Peter Kowalski and daughters Caitlin Kowalski and Lillian Chandler. This 18th day of November 2001, approved for entry Michael Ponce, Nina Parsley, and Brian Dunnigan.
The memorial resolution for Steve Cox will be presented by Frank Grace.
May it please the court. This memorial resolution is for Stephen E. Cox. Steve Cox passed away on March 3rd, 2021 in Knoxville, Tennessee, where he'd moved with his wife Jeanette after retirement. Born in St. Louis, Missouri in 1943, Steve served his country in the United States Army in Vietnam before graduating from the University of Tennessee undergraduate and law school in 1970. He was a partner at Manier and Harrod and later started Cox, Levan, Sprader, and Patton, where he was a full-time mediator until his retirement in 2014. He spent his last years enjoying all aspects of the University of Tennessee athletics. He was also a race fan and attended many events at Daytona and Indianapolis. Steve left an enduring legacy on other lawyers, friends, and colleagues. Most importantly, he trained some of Nashville's finest trial lawyers and taught them integrity, honesty, hard work, and fantastic trial skills. Steve was a lifelong trial lawyer and later mediator. He had a witty sense of humor and was always on point regardless of the situation. Steve was proud of his work ethic and relationship with other lawyers in the Nashville Bar. In addition to his wife Jeanette, he leaves behind his daughter Stephanie Cox and Stephen A. Cox Jr., a Nashville attorney. Steve was very proud of both of his children. Steve was full of life and enjoyed his time after retirement as a full-time Big Orange fan. He is sadly missed, but has left his mark on the Nashville bar forever as one of its best trial lawyers, mediators, and teachers of young professionals. Therefore, be it resolved that we honor the work, legacy, and life of our colleague and friend, Stephen E. Cox. Be it further resolved that this memorial resolution be placed in the permanent records of the association and entered in the memorial minute book of the Chancery Court of Davidson County, Tennessee, and that copies be furnished to his family. Respectfully submitted this 18th day of November 2021, James D.K. Jr. and Frank Grace Jr.
Thank you to each of the presenters today for your heartfelt and eloquent memorial resolutions. The Chancery Court is pleased to grant each of the motions today and accepts the memorial resolutions as part of the court's permanent records. The Nashville Bar Association, in accordance with its tradition, will provide copies of the resolutions to the families of each lawyer and judge. And with that, the Davidson County Chancery Court is adjourned. Thank you all for being here today.